Hey everybody, this is the Marine with Backpacking with a Hammock. Now that you have a hammock and you're thinking about going in the great outdoors hammock camping, unless you live in an area where it doesn't rain, the next piece of gear that you're going to need is a tarp. Now you may have one or you may be thinking about getting one. You're not sure which one to get or how to use it. Well, in this episode of hammocks and the 3 big mistakes people often make, we're going to look at what I believe are the 3 mistakes people make while using a tarp. And we're also going to look at how to overcome them so that you'll be more successful hammock camping. Now again, I like to say that these are just some suggestions and tips that I believe will help you succeed in hammock camping. Now I do these videos not to be a Mr. Know-It-All, because I don't know it all. And these videos are about pretty much the mistakes that I made and other people around me and how we overcame them to succeed in hammock camping. Now everyone has their different personal preference and different ways of doing things, and these are just some of the ways that I believe that will help you. With that being said, the first mistake that I believe is not having the right tarp. So when you're thinking about purchasing a tarp, there's a few things you have to consider. And the first one is how you're going to use it. How are you going to travel with it? If you're just going to go car camping, or you're going to use it for music festivals, or you just may do only hammock hangs, then a large tarp, a bulky one, will not matter. But if you're going to go backpacking and do long miles and long trips, then you may need a smaller, more compactable tarp so you can fit it in your pack. Now the second thing you may want to consider is the size of the tarp. That is for weather protection and for the different season, especially the length of the tarp, which is called the ridge line. Now a rule of thumb is if you have a 10-foot hammock, you'd want a 10-foot or 11-foot tarp. If you have a 10.5-foot hammock, 11-foot tarp would work best for you. And if you have 11-foot hammock, you'd want 11-foot or 12-foot tarp. You want the size not too small. So if your tarp is too short, the water break from the hammock will be exposed. Water will come hit this side of the water break and run into the hammock. So if your tarp is too short, you'll need to tie on a drip line. So when the water comes down, it'll hit that drip line and drip right down to the ground. Or not too big. Now if the tarp is too long, the ridge line will interfere with the suspension. Now the width and the shape of the tarp is personal preference. An ultralight hiker will like a tarp that's narrower or not as wide because it's lighter, because of less material on there. Or a backpacker that's out in the elements a lot would like a wider tarp, like myself, because if you have a lot of people around and it's raining, you can get underneath there and cook, or you can have other people that come underneath the tarp, especially if you have tent campers. Now the wider the tarp, the more protection you're going to have from the elements, not just from rain, but especially from wind that robs heat from you. And you may consider getting a tarp with doors on them, which is called a winter tarp. You can get doors on one side or on both sides, and that will give you the maximum protection from the elements, especially deflecting the wind, and especially using them for winter time. Now the third thing you may want to consider is the cost. Now if you're just starting off and you're hammock camping from a car, or you're going to concerts, or you're just doing hammock hangs, a poly tarp will work just fine. You can get them for $10 or less at any department store. But if you want to get into backpacking, you will need something a little bit lighter, supple, packable, and some type of nylon tarp will work just well. And they start off about $35 and up to about $150, depending on if you get one with doors and the size and the shape of it. And the last one is if you're really getting into ultralight backpacking, you want to get the weight down, you can get tarps under 5 ounces, but you're going to pay a lot for them, and they're made out of Cuban fiber or Dyneema, and they can cost from $300 all the way up to $500 or more. Now the second mistake we're going to look at isn't so much of being detrimental, but more so on the lack of being creative. Now I'm not telling you to be artsy, but if you set up your tarp a certain way to meet the weather condition or the elements that you're hammock camping at, it will produce the maximum enjoyment and experience instead of setting it up the same old way each and every time. Now for an example, when I come to camp, I'm not looking for 2 trees that are 15 to 20 feet, 4.5 to 7 meters apart to hang my hammock to get this ultimate hang. To me, the ultimate hang is searching for a tree that's going to give you the best view in your camp. And I'll sacrifice the distance between the trees to get that view. Now when I'm sitting in my hammock or I'm lying in my hammock, I have this great view And when I wake up in the morning, I want to be able to say, wow. Now another way to be creative with the tarp is on a windy day. So when I come to camp and it's really windy, especially if it's cold, I'll find 2 trees where the wind will come to the side of the tarp. And I'll take that side panel and I'll pitch it really low. And if you really want to be creative, you can take the other side and put it in porch mode and you won't even feel a breeze if you do it right. Now you can see that the tarp behind me is pitched low. I got it in porch mode, so the wind is heading this direction towards my back, and this will block the wind and I'll have no breeze in here. And this is where a wide tarp really shines. Now you may be planning on going backpacking in an area where the weather conditions can be extreme, or you may be thinking about getting into winter camping. And like I said earlier, I would suggest that you get a winter tarp, a tarp with 4 doors. And these make a great all-around tarp. You can use them in the winter time, the summertime. All you have to do is pin the doors back or roll them up. Yes, they're a few ounces heavier, but it's well worth it. Now another way to use a door is to set it up to deflect the wind. And like I said earlier, I had my door pitched down low to block that wind coming in because the wind was coming off the lake. Now with these types of tarps, you can really be creative. So in the winter time, you can dig around your hammock and set the tarp up right onto the snow. If not, you can throw some snow to completely enclose it.
All that got shoveled up here to be a bit of a windbreak. So the wind comes and for the most part goes over the top. And although I can hear the wind blowing in the trees, and it's windy at night, you go back and forth with the wind shifts, never had a breeze underneath the tarp.
And it acts just like a tent, and it gives you enough room to stand up, completely protected from the elements all around. So with this type of setup, you're going to need a little opening on top to prevent condensation. Now these are just some of the ways to be creative with the tarp, and I'm hoping to encouraging you to try something different, but that means you have to get out of your comfort zone and to improvise. Now the other day I had a viewer send me a text message, and I asked if I could read it, and he gave me permission to, and it reads like this. Hi sir, how are you? Got wet today. My tarp flew off at the stake. Any advice to have a solid setup? Enjoy the attached video, and I'll show you the video.
The wind is so strong.
Best regards, Jason. Jason, thank you for that question, which now leads us to our third big mistake, and that's staking down the tarp, especially in wet and saturated ground. Now up here where I live in upper Midwest, we've been experiencing a large quantity of rain. The ground has been saturated. This time of the year in the fall time, I should be taking my stake and pounding in with a hammer or a big rock. I can take with my hand and just push it into the ground. That's how saturated the ground has been. Now there's nothing worse than hammock camping and you wake up in the middle of the night because it's a windy night and the tarp comes undone, especially if it's raining. And I'm going to show you some tips that will help prevent this from ever happening. If you're going to use a stake, always put the stake in the ground at an angle. And if the ground is saturated and it's windy, what you want to do is put a log in front of it, or you want to put a rock in front of it. But the best way is try to find a tree with a root sticking out and put the stake behind the root, and that will always hold. Even in the windiest conditions, I've never seen one of those come out. And if it's a rocky area, try to find the edge of the rock in the ground and then drive the stake on the far end of the rock against the rock, and that will hold also. But the best is a tree root. Now my favorite way to stake down a tarp, and it's the first way I'll use when I come to camp if I can, is you take a piece of cordage, and I like Zing it because it's so supple, it's lightweight and very strong, and you cut it out in 10-foot, 12-foot section, which is 3 to 4 meters. And on the end you put a loop knot in there so you have a loop, and you wrap it around a tree, and you want to adjust it up and down the tree to get the height that you want on your tarp. And I'd also use small trees or brush and wrap it around, tie it off, and attach it to the tarp. Now if there's no trees or brush around, what you want to do is find a log that's thick or long, and you loop it around it and attach it to your tarp. Otherwise you can look for a big rock and loop it around the rock and attach it to your tarp. Well, this concludes this video series of hammocks, the 3 big mistakes people often make. And if you'd like more information on hammock and hammock camping, I did a video series called Hammocks, the Beginner's Guide, and I believe that would answer mostly any questions you would have about hammock and hammock camping. And again, if you like this video, please click that like button down below and share. If you found this video to be helpful and insightful, please hit that subscribe button, but you also got to hit that little bell over on the right hand side, and that will notify you when the next video comes out. And more important, if you have any questions or comments, I really would love to hear from you. Please write them down below. This is the Marine with Backpacking with a Hammock. Thank you for watching, and God bless.